My name is Arthur Gauvin. I am the Partnership Coordinator at the Next Straight Driving School. I'm here today to give a webinar alongside with our guest, Joan Cramer, who is uh, our occupational therapist on staff and a certified driving rehabilitation specialist. And she's going to join me. We're going to talk about our driver rehab program, who we service, what we do, and I have some questions for her that I'm excited to ask. I do know a little bit about the program, but Joan, nobody knows more than Joan, so I'm really excited to talk to her and answer any questions that you all have. So I'm gonna just quickly, before we get to that, show you um, our driver rehab website. So you can see on our website, there's a lot here. It's really easy to navigate, and you can look at all of the different things that you might fit into, and we go over all that. So I would advise either while we're going through this or after, just kind of checking out the website if you have any more questions or just want to see the other things that we offer and get some more information. So with that being said, we're going to move over, and Joan is with us right now. Hey, Joan, how are you?
Great. How are you, Arthur?
I'm doing well. So, Joan, if you want to just introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Joan Vigney Kramer. I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been doing driving rehabilitation since 2015. Very blessed and thrilled to be with part of the team here at the Next Street Driver Rehab Services and the driving school that's very successful for the past, I think, 12 or so years. And came on board a couple of years ago. It's already been 2.5 years, and we are growing our rehab division quite rapidly from Connecticut, now Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So it's been a really great run of working with people of all diagnoses and backgrounds and learning so much about being a driving instructor now, which was a big accomplishment for me. And I'm thrilled to be here today to be able to share what we're doing as a company um, with all of you.
That's awesome. So, yeah, so Joan, I remember you came on right when I was training to be an instructor. I remember specifically like you coming on and us having a conversation in the elevator just about, I just remember so clearly because I thought it was so cool. Um, just the whole program. I didn't really know anything about it going in, and then I met you and we kind of talked about it, and I already felt like um, you really had a grasp on what you wanted the program to be, and you and Brandon already really felt like this could be such an awesome thing, and I'm excited that you're still here and that we're just growing, and the program has really thrived despite COVID and just obstacles in general. You never really know how something like this is going to go. Um, and But I do have a couple. I have a couple things I wanted to ask you, just to kind of get things kicked off, and then you can go into more detail about certain things as we go along. So, what exactly, what exactly is the program, and who does it service?
So driving rehabilitation is a specialty area for an occupational therapist, but it does not require that you're only an occupational therapist, because we know that talented and committed driving instructors are also just as important in this journey for an individual learning how to drive with it. We call it an accommodation. The accommodations are the challenges, the obstacles you just talked about. Those for some people have started at birth. So if somebody was born with a weakness on one side of their body, they maybe grew up thinking I'll never drive like all my siblings, but I've had plenty prove me wrong, if you just give them the right equipment and the right approach to education and teaching and a different timeline to accomplish that goal, they've been able to be just as independent and thrive. Others might have been very active, dynamic truck drivers or professional vice presidents of huge companies, and they have a stroke or a head injury or have a orthopedic injury to their right leg or arm, one arm. But those individuals have to relearn how to drive using an accommodation and work not only on the physical expectations, but also on the emotional expectations that go along with it, because you have to accept the need for an adaptive device. You have to accept the need to put the energy into working. We are really blessed to be able to meet people where they function. So somebody who's aged and has some memory problems, the early stages of a dementia or a cognitive problem, they might still be able to get to their doctor's appointment and to the bank because they've been going there for 20 years from their house to the doctor, the bank, the store. And they're the caregiver of a spouse sometimes. So keeping them independent and thriving in that capacity is really important. Bringing somebody to a foreign place, also driving an unfamiliar vehicle can be really scary for some folks. So it's quite a unique, individualized approach for every person, whether young, a new driver, an experienced driver, or somebody who might be being evaluated knowing I might not be able to drive anymore. So it's the full gamut.
Right. Yeah. And, on that same, train of thought, who are the people, who are your most common clients, I should say?
I think that people who've had neurological diseases that are slowly progressing, as well as individuals who've had acute illness, such as a stroke or a head injury in an accident, oftentimes experience a change in the use of one side or both sides of their body. Spinal cord injury patients could be part of that, where they might not be able to walk and they're in a wheelchair, but it doesn't mean they can't drive. That's a big group of people, but that type of patient is a common grouping. And the other grouping are the young people who might have challenges learning. They might be really intelligent and smart, but very concrete in thinking, and maybe not as coordinated or not as agile with allowing rules to be broken should somebody in front of them not use their turn signal. That could become a huge distraction. So young people with various learning challenges, autism or developmental challenges of all levels, they might need to be taught in a unique fashion. While our driving school has been doing that in an amazing way without really knowing they were doing driving rehab. We service a lot of young people with special accommodations. At this point with our rehab program, we can actually do an evaluation, a clinical assessment as occupational therapists, so that we can help a family member prepare for the future. Some of these young people might not have that maturity level to tolerate driving quite at 16 like their peers, but yet when they're 19, 20, 21, they're probably going to be ready to take on that challenge, that very complex, multi-level task of driving.
Yeah.
And we can help families prepare by assessing and advocating for them to have extra services that can guide them along that journey.
That's great. And I think, just to touch on something that you talked about briefly and brought up is the assessments. So if you could just, shed some light on exactly, what those look like and what kind of the steps
question.
are.
Yep. Great question. So we as a company offer kind of two levels of assessing. One is called a clinical assessment for driving, a clinical driving assessment. And it's an objective, standardized, evidence-based assessment by an occupational therapist trained in driving rehabilitation, who is able to look at the fundamental skill sets that somebody needs to be able to safely operate a vehicle. And that might be a physical ability. It might be a visual skill set, not just how clear we see or how much peripheral vision. Those are two state regulations, but also how they use that vision, how they take in information. That's not necessarily easy to measure, but we work on that skill set. And we look at their emotional status too. If somebody's got some cognitive issues that make them really belligerent or angry at one little thing, then they're maybe not safe to be driving quite yet. That individual is seen for a clinical assessment. And then if they do really well with their testing and are viewed as capable of learning a new strategy of driving with adaptive devices or a standard conventional car, our next level would be to do a driving evaluation. We have been able to work with some of our staff in the driving school to come on board to begin, preparing as a driving rehabilitation specialist, working with our population so that they can do a very pointed checking of skill sets, such as how they turn, how they manage turn signals, how do they manage intersections and different turns in the environments of different traffic flow, and just their overall capability of driving as an experienced driver after a medical issue. Or young people who have challenges, where are they at? How are we going to get them so they can get their license? So
Right.
that's part of our driving evaluation.
Yeah, and actually, just because you mentioned it, Ron Pars was on a couple of weeks ago in one of our career presentations, and yeah, Ron was telling us, he was right then kind of working on getting ready to become a driving rehabilitation specialist. So if you could just talk about, how that training process has gone and kind of shifting some of, these career driving instructors, they've been with us a long time. They're really good at what they do, and kind of shifting them to the rehab side of things and how that's gone.
So it's been a great journey. Ron has been a great resource to me since I started with the company. I remember when Ron was in orientation, much like yourself, when I don't remember your elevator situation, but
Yeah, I remember.
Grilling me. Ron grilled me in his orientation. I was introduced to the new group, and he started quizzing me then about, oh, what do you do and how does it work? And I was like, oh, who's this guy? And it took about a year and a half. I realized when he started to get involved with expressing interest, that's the guy in orientation. So Ron has a drive and interest. He has a natural knack of understanding populations' medical status. We can't diagnose, myself included, with a degree. We aren't doctors. We can't put labels on people, nor do we. We individualize our interventions for every single student at the school level as well as on the rehab program. And that is just something that's not, there's no room for wiggle for that. So Ron had shared with me some questions and shared with me some insight to some of his driving school students that helped us determine that Ron had a knack. Ron had an insight to disability. Some people have experiences in other aspects of their life that help them know they want to work with this population. It's a population that requires very unique and individualized and patient approaches. We have to be open to knowing there's not a cookie cutter method of teaching somebody how to drive with a hand control. We have learned ourselves. Ron is in the learning curve right now of learning not just one type of hand control, but there's like 4 different attachments to a hand control to use different muscle groups for somebody who has an injury or a disease that's affecting their hand versus their shoulder versus their forearm. And we might be able to trial and error different devices to work within their ability. And it takes quite a while for somebody to kind of go through all of those pieces of equipment, but with patience and with practice, we have to master using those equipments as well.
Right.
It's called muscle memory, right? Because we all learned how to drive with our right foot and didn't think of it. It was scary back then. The scarier when you have to switch gears and your brain has to start doing something totally differently.
Right.
So
kind of retraining yourself in that way.
It's been fun.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I would expect nothing less from Ron. He's just the best. And but you were talking about it, and my background. I know you can't see it, but my background right now is the van that we use,
Right.
and if you could just talk about a little bit about the van, because and you touched on it, but just how I mean, it's such an amazing thing, and what kind of opportunities that gives to people who didn't really think that they had an opportunity to drive.
Yeah, I actually have my Facebook on down below here. So, yep,
Okay, so you can. Okay, yeah.
dynamic piece of equipment that is the only one really in Connecticut. It starts with entry. How do you get into your vehicle? So it has a fold down ramp that allows somebody in a wheelchair to get in. I will be able to remove what's in place as a driver's seat to work with a gentleman in another couple of weeks who can only drive within his power wheelchair, and we'll set him up like securing his chair with straps so he can trial hand controls, and be able to continue driving his already semi-modified top of the line van that he's already using from his wheelchair.
Right.
His feet no longer work. So we look again, all right, your feet aren't working. So what other means can we give you to be independent? So again, our van in the picture, their hand controls for most cars are over to the left side of the wheel so that you have the freedom to still do wipers or switch your gears. And, there's lots to driving, a lot of secondary controls. It's not just temperature, it's not just turn signals and wipers, and what if the radio suddenly got loud, or you need your GPS louder. There's so many things you still have to think about. The mirrors, again, are a secondary tool. So some people don't have the spot mirrors on their side mirrors, but our van has extra spot mirrors to increase that blind spot awareness. Our van also is the only one in the state that has, we can evaluate if somebody can turn the wheel easier if we change the resistance of the wheel. So I've had young people, I had brothers once with the same, sadly, with the same disease, but one had different trunk strength than the other. So one needed me to give him half the resistance of what a vehicle has from the manufacturer. And once I took away all this force of him turning the wheel, he was no longer using his body to move the wheel.
Right.
So it was pretty amazing when you sit behind somebody and see how much control they can gain and freedom by just changing that wheel resistance.
And that's something that you wouldn't even think of necessarily.
No.
Like as as just, a typical person, you're driving and you don't think, the resistance is what it is, but it's amazing what the difference can be when for someone who needs it, and how you can kind of change everything with it. Yeah. But yeah,
you also can't drink coffee when you use hand controls and have a hand on the wheel and one hand on your gas.
Right.
Coffee, you can't do a lot of things.
Yeah, and
granted, you're absolutely right.
And the mirrors too. That's one of those ones where, because for a little bit before COVID happened, I was helping Driver Rehab out and going out and doing some events and stuff and talking about it. And I remember one of the things that a lot of people, didn't really think of, but it makes a lot of sense, is for someone, say, who's older or who doesn't have as much neck mobility, checking those blind spots is something that could completely take you out of being able to drive. If you can't check your blind spot, you can't drive safely, obviously. And just being able to put an adaptive mirror or something that can make it easier for them and eliminate those blind spots can just, increase the longevity of someone's ability to drive so much, or give them the ability to drive safely,
Right.
But yeah, so we talked about the van and everything, and I was excited to kind of talk a little bit about just the expanding nature of the program, and how, you know, the first part of the next street that was in, you know, that's in Massachusetts, which is a place that we're heading to next, was the Driver Rehab Services. And just, if you could just talk a little bit about, you know, some of the expanding and how exciting that is.
Oh, it's exciting. Yeah. We are now servicing individuals in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. When I heard of a company that was looking to get some help in Massachusetts, we were able to kind of take on one of their very seasoned individuals who's a certified driving rehab specialist, which means that that person has passed a competency test, which is quite hard. You have to put in a lot of time to prove your knowledge base, and it does take time because there's so much diversity in what we have to figure out for individuals. And John Holcomb is this individual in Massachusetts who comes to us very seasoned, and we are able to learn from him and his knowledge. A population, one of their big populations based on their structure of driver's ed in Massachusetts has been that they work very closely with young new drivers who are struggling with a traditional driving school format and who have some special learning challenges that he's able to work through and give them a little extra time and direction, maybe progressing somebody from an hour lesson to an hour and a half to two, and build up that endurance. So like a big part of his program is that program of working with inexperienced young drivers with special needs, but also we're working with the vocational rehabilitation programs of the states. So the state of Massachusetts, the state of Rhode Island, and the state of Connecticut all get funded to assist individuals with disabilities for their functional skills. So driving is considered a functional skill because it helps you get to work. It helps you live independently. It helps you be able to provide for yourself if you can work more hours, you know? So we are working very closely with those three groups to be able to get their clients, their residents, through a system more quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, and that's just amazing, you know. And the more that we can expand this, the more people that, you know, have the opportunity of being helped. And speaking of, just to kind of circle back on it a little bit, you've talked about it a couple times, is you know, people on the spectrum, you know, and you know, with ASD, you know, what I know that we have some programs in place, and I wanted you to kind of again shed some light on it.
So the first part of that program would be that parents, one of the things that brought me to the next street was that for my first couple of years in this business line, I would get calls constantly from parents wanting their child on the spectrum to functioning very well in life, but driving is a complex task, and they just weren't sure if their child would be safe to do that. And there really wasn't a lot of access for that. And I learned over time and with some investigating that the next street was a pretty dynamic driving school that didn't have a formal program, but that they were doing it. And so we were able to help offer more structure to that goal directed plan for a parent and their child. First and foremost, the child has to want to drive. Parents sometimes come and say, my child has to drive because that's how they'll be independent.
Right.
That is not going to make a young person learn how to drive, because there's a little bit more fear factor with this population. They are very much rule followers. They like structure. They like, you know, they like certain sensory levels. And sometimes if you think about being stuck on the highway at 5 o'clock and you don't plan it, or a detour on the road at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it can be stressful. So we work real hard at individualizing our training, allowing a certain lesson to be planned and prepared, as Ron has done amazingly. So he recently planned with a parent to have a police officer in town basically make a stop so that this young person wouldn't be in panic mode, but learn like it's okay. I can manage. If a police officer shows up behind me, they're not necessarily coming after me. They could be going on to the guy in front of me or to an emergency. And all those extrasensory things are what we're going to be able to propose to individuals if they need it, and help them learn to tolerate it and manage it and make sure they're fully safe, as well as their parents, because parents need to practice with these young kids. And basically, the parents can be part of our training because they can all learn how we might get a child to do something because we're not their parents. Let's be honest. Kids sometimes don't listen to their parents and listen to others. That's across the board. And so the parents can learn our strategy, I've figured this out with 17 other kids. So let me try this approach. If it works, okay, mom and dad, I need you to use this approach. Don't use any other. Follow our plan. And they begin practicing more. And they all work well together that way. And it might take longer, but that population is definitely in need of unique, individualized approach. And I know from my colleagues across the country, working with a high functioning autism person when it comes to driving can sometimes take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years or more to master all the individualized parts to driving. And again, it's about how much exposure they have in between lessons, how much determination. There's so many variables. And so we individualize it. That's part of the occupational therapy assessment in the beginning, looking at that individualized approach. It might be that we'd have to a year later do a little bit more. And we do have, I'm really excited to not be the only occupational therapist. This week, we have 2 new occupational therapists who have joined our team, one in Massachusetts and one in Rhode Island. And we'll be working really hard together to have a unified approach for across the whole company to evaluate and influence not only the clients that we serve, their families that are part of our service, but also our driving instructors, because not all of them might need a me to do that training.
Right.
Might get really good, but just need 12 more lessons, but not necessarily with a me, so they can go to our driving school and have a different access to our service and programming. So we're really excited. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Oh, I think everyone in the company is. And I think a big part of that, and just because I think it's important to talk about it, but Brandon Dufour, who's the CEO and owner of the Next Street, I know, like, I see how much he, like, there's nothing really that I've seen him care more about than the driver rehab services in general. And like, he loves the Next Street so much, and I just know like how much he talks about it and how hard he works on it and how much he really wants this to be everywhere. And if you could just kind of give your thoughts a little bit, and don't worry, he won't see this, but just talk a little bit about Brandon and how working with him has been to kind of move forward.
So I remember meeting with Brandon after a client of mine who was a friend of his went through an assessment with me and needed some practice driving because he hadn't driven in a very long time. And I got a phone call, and I was a very polite, upbeat individual. Hi, I'm calling about so-and-so. And it turned on, I said, oh, of course my brain was thinking, I'm like, how do I get involved with this? How do I get more referrals from this program?
Right.
So I said to him, are you one of the managers? He goes, well, I'm the owner, and you want to buy me? And he made a joke of it. And I was like, wow, the owner's calling me. He really cares about his friend and making sure he's ready to drive and be safe. And from there, we did a couple of different conversations about how I knew in my heart that young people needed a driving school for individualized training with the autism especially. And also that the state needed to have more driving schools available to do some modified driving because there weren't options.
Yeah, or any,
Happen.
you know.
And Brandon was open to that and took a huge gamble bringing me on board. And we did a lot of programming, establishing some relationships with all the hospitals, and committed to allowing me to stay educated and competent with the practice of driving rehab. And he's involved with the autism population and the Alzheimer's population. And he's really letting people know that driving can be not just a freeing, independent task, but really a life-changing task. From the older person who needs socialization and wants to remain independent after being a professional and an accomplished person, and losing your license at 80 or 85. I had somebody 89 yesterday who wants to learn how to use hand controls. Who says he can't? It's about ability, not about age.
Yeah.
And he was able to see that. He had that ability to understand and respect that we are here to help people stay independent. We are here to grow the awareness to the populations, the public, that we're here to help them make the right decision, not just have somebody say, you're old, you can't drive, or you have autism, no, you can't drive. We're going to help figure out where that barrier is. And he's been supportive of all of what we're doing, and by bringing on more staff and expanding into Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and seeing all the different states have different rules and regulations. And he has been the trooper and the spearhead of all those relationships. And it's been very time committing, I'm sure. And yet, even despite the challenges of COVID, we've grown during that time, which just tells you his commitment to doing something that can make a difference in lives.
Yeah. And again, it trickles down to everyone, you know, and I feel like, you know, there is this passion, when there's the passion from the top, it does come down to everyone. And there are instructors like Ron who want to be a part of it, you know, and want to help grow this program, this service that we offer by kind of shifting, because it is, like you said, it's a learning curve. There's a lot to learn. And when he could have stayed, where he was, I think that it's just a universal passion within the company about this. And I think it's really exciting. And the more that, the more people we bring on, the more people will know about it and learn, and it's a pretty awesome thing to feel like there is care here, So, okay. Tell me a little bit about your background and, just kind of how you became an occupational therapist and what made you want to do this, because this is it's definitely not, the first thing you think of growing up as I want to be a driving rehabilitation specialist, it's something that you kind of have to find along the way. So I'm interested to hear about, where that came from.
Wow. I think there's a lot of years of becoming an occupational therapist. It's Occupational Therapy Month, so it's a great opportunity for me to say how blessed I feel to have found occupational therapy. Because, like you said, it's not just about driving rehab. Occupational therapy, back when I became an occupational therapist, wasn't like the career everybody ran to. It wasn't nursing or physical therapy. It was occupational therapy, and I was blessed to have a wonderful guidance counselor who introduced it to me because a friend of hers was an occupational therapist. So I have done work in acute care settings, in hospitals, seeing somebody the day they have a stroke, to my later years. A big part of my over 30 years has been working with people in their homes, doing home care. And just every diagnosis, every age. I love the babies. I love the older people. I love working with the Alzheimer's. I love working with the orthopedic hand patients. I really have done a lot of that work in all areas. So for me, getting involved with driving rehab, I knew it existed and I knew it was part of what I could do as an occupational therapist. It's part of our practice act. And we work on functional skills. We work on how does somebody dress themselves, bathe themselves, perform. As a home care therapist, it's funny when I look back, I feel guilty often because I never would say, now, are you driving? Or what's your plan to get back behind the wheel? Or I
Right.
asked the question. And now I'm an advocate like crazy to ask my peers, my colleagues, what are you doing to prepare the patient on day one? I think back to my husband having a small stroke in his eye, and the first thing out of his mouth, he turned to me and he's like, don't even think you're taking my license,
Right.
because he knows what I do. But a number of years ago, my mom, after losing my dad, we realized that some of my dad's role was covering up for my mom's challenges. And so we learned that unfortunately my mom had early signs of dementia. My mom was struggling driving. There were a few accidents. Doctors were saying she needed to get evaluated, and finally got to where their testing said, if you don't get evaluated, we'll take your license and we'll call DMV. And that was scary. And that's what's that's a common thing still. Doctors struggle because they know somebody shouldn't drive, but they don't know what to do about it because they're not in an environment to test it. So that being said, I went and watched my mom's driving evaluation by a colleague. I did not know this individual, even though we live in a small state. And Mary Johnson, who was a certified driving rehab specialist at McLean at the time, she did a phenomenal job. And I just went, oh my gosh, I got to do this. This is awesome. Like, this is what I love to do. I never dreamed that I'd get the opportunity. A couple of years later, somebody asked me if I'd be interested in getting starting the certification process. So I went off and took a course for a week in Florida and came back and still had a lot of learning to do. And I reach out to my colleagues all over the country and call people for advice if I get a new diagnosis that I've never seen before. And I know that my years of experience have helped me be able to handle the different types of patients I'm seeing. So I just am passionate about the last 6 years of my career, because I know when I see a young lady who was born with a stroke take off and drive, it's like, yes, wow, like she would have never had that opportunity using her left foot to drive. I have a young kid right now who is born with some limited limbs, and he and I were driving, and he has like one partial hand, and I got him electronic controls, and we are having a ball driving. And I know he passed his license test, and he wants to have a minivan so he can have a couch. And you think about the amount of emotion that is for him, and it's just like overwhelming for me, because that young man was really angry to think he needed all that, and now he's like owned it, and I helped him get through that. And occupational therapy isn't just about physical, it's about emotions, and it's about coping, and it's about taking the time to listen to people. And I think about the people I have to tell they can't drive anymore, and it's the most difficult thing in the world to do, but it's even harder to hear. And I let them cry, and I let them share why it's hard and what does it mean to them. And the spouses sit behind them crying themselves, and kids crying. But you know what? I listen, and I make sure we are there for the whole person, not just that person who can no longer drive.
Yeah, I mean I can only imagine how, I did instructing, and just even doing that is rewarding, but I can't imagine someone who never thought maybe they could ever drive, or had their ability to drive hindered in some way, and like just I can't imagine how rewarding that must feel to like you said, see them drive off and gain that independence and gain just that quality of life back,
Yeah.
And it's especially in Connecticut. I mean, we talk about it, you'll have people joke about it all the time, but if you can't drive in Connecticut, you're not getting anywhere. There's no way to get around. And
That's a
it's
big part of
amazing.
what
Yeah.
we do, though, as driving rehab specialists, because if somebody can't drive, I have the great pleasure of knowing a lot about the state because this is the only place I've worked and I did home care throughout the state. So I'm able to help people navigate finding resources. And you're absolutely right. There are some segments of our state that do not have public transportation at all. Yep.
Yeah.
Big issue.
Yeah. And just the fact that there is a pathway is amazing.
Hmm.
So in these last about 15 minutes, we're gonna open up for any questions that anyone has. While those questions are coming in, Joan, if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief, just 1 minute kind of summary of the process with the program and everything like that, and how you get signed up and what that
Yeah,
is.
that would be great. Um, we are not required to have a doctor's prescription, so we will accept a self-referral, but we do ask people for their medical history. And if possible, a doctor should be a part of that because we want to do our best work by that patient and make sure that everybody's safe. We will ask people to call our main number. We have actually grown so much. We have a second person on our call center for rehab. 860-483-7009 is our number, or our email is rehab@thenextstreet.com. And we are able to take information, even if it's a question about your situation, and guide you. All of our staff are able to guide you through what you need to do next, depending on where you are in the loop. No one can go into our vehicles for a drive unless they have a driving license or a driver permit. And that's sometimes our little bit of a barrier for newer people, but that's where getting the clinical assessment by an occupational therapist is going to help people move towards that next step of, am I ready to get a permit? And if they do have a permit, we're going to do a driving evaluation as soon as it's appropriate and establish a plan for that individual. And for some people, it might take 4 or 5 lessons to learn how to use adaptive devices, and some people it might take 15.
Yeah.
Some people are able to pay for it out of pocket. Some people have to go through other alternative means to get the equipment that they need, whether it be through the vocational programs or through funding or a wide variety, and we individualize that as well. But overall, that's how our process works. But really and truly, it's really important that we know about the whole patient. I say patients, sorry, we call them clients, but I'm a medical background for
No,
many.
I understand. Yeah.
We really do want to know about what's going on because that's how we can better assist the person.
Yeah. Well, I think you've just been so thorough that we haven't gotten a ton of questions here. We did get a couple people talking. We had one person just thanking us for helping her son with her virtual OT assessment. And that's just, again, like you said, those are the types of things that make you want to continue to do what you do, I'm sure, and give you, again, that maybe that, obviously we won't get into their details, but it's maybe that person wasn't sure if driving was for them, or whatever it might be, and it's really amazing.
The virtual consultations have been really exciting, and it's exactly what you just said. It's a guide, it's a starting point, and it gets people going to know what's next and
Yeah.
what to anticipate.
There has been as awful as COVID has been, it has helped us pivot to a more virtual world, which has opened up accessibility tenfold to people, not only within just the Next Street Driving School, but also Next Street Driver Rehab, and the virtual services are really important. How can parents advocate so schools to this, so the school or driving school would consider them. Not exactly sure.
So parents can advocate. That's
Yeah.
a really great question. And if you asked that to Ron Pars, he'd have a fast answer, and I know it.
Yeah.
Ron Pars has been a driving instructor with us for a couple of years now, and the biggest thing is the parents need to disclose what their child's needs are.
Mm-hmm.
And if we know what the need is, we're going to put the recommendation out there of what avenue to start the course of education. Basically, some young people need to just start our education. Our Zoom lessons are slower pay, our 30 hours of education, and start with our regular driving school. Some need to start with a clinical assessment to know where they're at and what's best for them. Some might need to take on that 30 hours of education, but also get seen for a driving evaluation behind the wheel once they have their permit by a driving rehab specialist who might have a different focus on how to implement that learning opportunity. And it's disclosing and owning it and sharing it, and we will be able to guide you way more efficiently.
Yeah, giving us the information, being open with that information is the only way that we can really truly help in that way. Well, Joan, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you talking about everything and talking about Driver Rehab Services in general. It's an extremely exciting thing that we're doing, and it's it's just one of those things that you don't really think about unless you need it, and so yeah, if you have any closing thoughts or anything that you wanted to just kind of go out on, and then I'm going to show a little video here at the end of someone who was helped a lot by Driver Rehabilitation. But yeah, you can go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, I happen to know the story you're showing, and that's just it. We're here to help every person who isn't sure how they can get back behind the wheel. And really, it's an individualized program that takes time and patience and desire and commitment from the people in their lives, sometimes to get you to a lesson, or sometimes to get you behind the wheel when it's a little scary if you're mom or dad. But basically, somebody like our video person, I think back to her comment to us when we met her was, despite how horrible her situation was, lying in a bed, unable to move, she was thinking about, how am I going to get around in a car? And she struggled to find a resource. Yeah. We weren't part of that playing field yet, but now we don't want anyone at all to feel like they're stuck and have nowhere to go. We are here. We'll assist them. We'll Zoom with them. We'll help guide them from the beginning stages of hope. I worked with my cousin who was at Gaylord, and I remember being in the gym with him, and he was telling everybody there that I was going to get him to drive, and he's driving and doing miraculously well, both because of the rehab team and because we got him safe behind the wheel, and they knew what to do. We work as a team with all those providers. So we're here. If you have questions, don't ever hesitate to give us a call, and we will be there for you across all 3 states that we serve.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joan. As we were just talking about, I'm going to show just a quick 2-minute video of just a woman named Jill Harpin, who we got to know, and we did a little video on. So enjoy that. Joan, thank you so much. And again, we'll have you back on very soon. Any questions, you call the number. I believe it was put in the chat, or go to the website. So I'm going to kind of play us out with that video. And
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. And have a good weekend.
You too.
All right. So I'm going to play this now, and then we'll be done. So thank you again, everyone who joined and who talked. Here is that video.
3 years ago, while I was on vacation with my best friends, I stepped out onto the balcony of my hotel room to make a phone call. I went to sit on the railing but lost my balance and fell 3 stories to the ground. I fractured 3 vertebrae in my back, my sternum, several ribs, and sustained a spinal cord injury and was completely paralyzed from the waist down. My life seemed like it had been ripped out from under me. I felt helpless and was completely dependent on everyone around me. I couldn't sit up in bed, I couldn't dress myself, and I wasn't focused on anything other than getting through the next hour of my hospital stay. But I didn't give up. I kept getting stronger, and all those impossible tasks started getting a little bit easier. I made it my mission to not let any of the people supporting me down. They believed in me so strongly, and it really helped me believe in myself. I had all these people around me telling me I was so strong and I would be able to get through this, and I started believing it. As I started getting stronger physically, I started getting stronger mentally, and I started pushing myself outside of my comfort zone and doing things that I never would have thought of doing before I got injured. I joined an adaptive gym and started participating in races and a hand cycle. I worked up to doing half marathons, and now I'm doing 40-mile races in the mountains of Colorado. Being able to drive has given me my final piece of independence back. It has gotten me to all of those races, doctor's appointments, girls' nights, and it gets me to work every single day. It has given me the ability to become a productive member of society and pursue my goals without having to rely on anyone else.